The left is crazy and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. And we have a special guest today, and that is Matt Morgan. Matt is a member of the Maryland House of Delegates, and we welcome Matt. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Glad you're here. And so this podcast is called The Left is Crazy because they are crazy and they're going crazy. And we do have a dumbest bill in America. So first up, the liberal mental health is declining. Liberal mental health is declining. Actually, there is some science to this. In the Washington Free Beacon and also the Washington Times, this is what they say. White liberals are significantly more likely than other racial and ideological groups to be diagnosed with a mental health condition, according to science. That doesn't come as a surprise to me.
Well, they're also the most likely to complain of a mental health.
That's true. You know, if I wore a mask 24/7, I would probably have a mental health condition too. But the findings from a Pew Research Center survey, it's a Pew Research Center survey, okay? So it's a scientific survey, published in March, were the subject of a recent Twitter thread that inspired an Evie magazine. Is that how you say that? Is it Evie or Evie? I don't even know. Article on the possible scientific correlation between progressive ideas and mental illness. So might be a linkage between the two. You might be a progressive with all of these ideas and concerns and at the same time have mental illness. According to the survey, white liberals of all ages were more likely to have been diagnosed with a mental health condition compared with their moderate and conservative peers. The disparity was especially pronounced among young people aged 18 to 29, millennials, the most annoying demographic and the one with the worst opinions, generally speaking. Well, I mean, I'm not sure that's true, but nearly half of young white liberals, 46%, reported being diagnosed with a mental health condition. I mean, it's not really funny, but it's like, why, right? Why so many white liberals? That was significantly higher than the percentage of young white moderates, only 26%, and young white conservatives, only 21%. Said they had reported a mental health diagnosis. Young white people who identified as very liberal were considerably more likely to report mental health problems, even compared with their peers who identified as liberal. So this article goes on and on. You get the drift that essentially there is a problem in the progressive and liberal movement where people are so unhappy. That's what the article goes on to say. They're so unhappy with so many things going on in their lives as well as the lives of the nation, the people in the nation, as well as in the world. They have so many concerns that it's giving them a mental health crisis and condition. Now, Delegate Matt Morgan is actually on the Health and Government Operations Committee. He hears bills like this all the time. So you really get a real sense of what's happening in society in terms of mental health issues. What do you have to say about this with liberals and their mental health declining?
Well, I mean, obviously, if they're sick and really sick, we'd like to give them treatment. But so much of this, I think, is just from a kinder, gentler society that we've been portraying the last decade. This is the participation trophy generation. And it's coming ahead because they need it to be about them. And to me, it reminds me of a lot of attention seekers.
It's interesting because when we say this podcast is called The Left is Crazy, and we're talking about mental health issues that are skewed towards progressives and liberals, the thing I think of is if you are a white, liberal, self-hating person because of the fact that your color is white, and you believe in systemic racism, it's no wonder you hate yourself. And because if you're buying into all this stuff, you're thinking, well, I'm a bad person just by virtue of the color of my skin. At least that's what I'm being told. And if you're a liberal and a progressive, and I know plenty of them who actually believe this, it's no wonder you have a mental health condition. It means you can't live from day to day healthy and hate yourself at the same time. It's mutually incompatible.
Well, there's different degrees of crazy. I think we can agree on that. I mean, there's some people that are legitimately need help, and then there's the type of crazy that vote for AOC in a primary. So you really need to distinguish between the two.
Well, these are the same people, these are the same millennials, by the way, who watch AOC's different, videos that she does with her cell phone, like the one where she's like, "Oh my God, I have a garbage disposal, and I've never had a garbage disposal
Now,
before."
I watch those too. I admit they're hilarious. It really tells you about what the other side is really thinking.
Exactly. It's like
It's eye-opening.
It's like, I hate to tell you this, AOC, but garbage disposals were probably invented like 50 years ago. And I know that not everybody has one. Like, I don't have one. And the reason I don't have one is because I have a septic system and it'll clog up your septic system. And I also don't like them because I think that they smell over a period of time. That's the real reason we don't have one in my house. But they've been around for 50 years, right? You've been somewhere where there has been one. It's just like, oh my gosh, I've got one. But, it's no wonder if you're watching something like that and you're progressive or you're liberal, you're watching it going, wow, this is really cool. I mean, I've just discovered something new. And then you call your mental health provider and said, hey, you know something? I just discovered that AOC has a garbage disposal. So
it makes you what they think about the first time they see fire.
I'm sorry. The reason why I just want our listeners to know out there in podcast land, we're not making fun of people with mental health conditions at all. I just want to make that clear. What we're doing is we're saying that a lot of these things on the liberal side and the progressive side, they're self-induced. I have no doubt that they are, because, as I said, you can't continuously go through life saying that because I'm white and because I'm successful, or just because I'm Protestant, as we've seen in different kinds of reports, that those people are privileged, and they're more privileged than the next group, which is white, I think Catholics or something like that. And then there's this whole scale that goes down. And then if you think that, then you're naturally going to self-flagellate. You're going to say, well, I just hate myself, so I need help. That part I find ridiculous.
Well, that part is ridiculous. And when it comes down to it, we're splitting up society based on groups.
Exactly.
I mean, this sounds like something that was originally written by the KKK. That we come out there and you're taught from, it's unbelievable that this has found its way into the school systems.
Critical race theory.
Yeah, that our school teachers are now required to learn this as a part of their licensure to be able to teach.
Yes.
That this has creeped into the school system. We're taught that, from the time you're born, because of the melatonin in your skin, that one group becomes the oppressor and one group becomes the oppressed, the victims.
Exactly.
And I can't think of a worse lesson to teach children than that.
And you can't ever overcome it, according to them, because you can't change the color of your skin. But maybe Democrats will invent that, because, of course, Democrats think you can change your sex. So maybe eventually they'll try to figure that out, too. Well, Michael Jackson figured it out, I think, but that's a whole nother issue. That probably was a mental health condition as well, quite frankly.
I think he had several of them.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. So next up, podcast listeners, the left threatens us. Let me say that again. The left threatens elected officials. And this is the crazy left, right? Why do they threaten elected officials? Because if they don't agree with you, they want to cancel you. So as I said, we have with us Delegate Matt Morgan, and Delegate Matt Morgan has gotten a number of different phone calls over the years, and I will say that I have too. And we have two really great clips, and they're just for listening only, so they're audio only. There's no video, because they were phone messages that were left, and they were left on the machine, if you will. And both of the phone messages, one from Matt and then one from me, were threatening to us because the person who was on the left disagreed with our position. And rather than try to leave a message to say, hey, let's talk about this, I disagree with your position, and here's why I disagree with your position, and I think these are the good reasons to support the bill that I like, or not support the bill that I don't like, instead of going in that direction, they just leave messages saying, I'm going to cancel you. I mean, this is just, in my opinion, this shows a mental health condition. It really does. It shows that they have some issues on the left and that they have lost their mind. So first up, Matt Morgan is here with us, and he had a bill concerning the $15 minimum wage, or there was an issue. Set this up for us.
So right after I believe it was the 2019 session, Democrats pushed forward a $15 minimum wage bill. We came out pretty strong with that, and kind of led the charge opposing that. And we should have a bill, have a philosophical discussion.
Why did you oppose the $15 minimum wage?
Well, I don't think it's right to force employers to pay. This is a consensual relationship between employer and employee.
Sure.
And I don't know what the amount of money, the justification is for government to be involved in that. And
so you don't like the idea of government dictating to small businesses in the private sector what wage they should pay, because that's the whole reason that people are self-employed, is because they actually want to pay people more so they can grow the business, and it increases more entry-level jobs, presumably.
Right. We would never pass a law to require someone to work for a certain wage. So I don't know why we would pass a certain law to require an employer to pay someone for a certain wage.
Got it.
And, we can have a disagreement about this. We can have, talk about the social benefits of it. But they don't want this discussion. They don't want an open, honest dialogue because they normally lose on those situations.
So get this, podcast listeners. So we set this up. So then someone calls up Delegate Matt Morgan and leaves a threatening message about the $15 minimum wage that he opposes. So he's opposing the bill. And this caller, of course, supports the bill. And the caller is, of course, on the far left. Instead of the caller just, once again, talking about the merits of the bill and debating that, oh no, they just left this message and it was all about canceling the person. We have that clip, and here it is.
Morgan, this is I was just calling to tell you that I saw, I guess maybe the email or post you sent out about trying to get people to testify against raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I just wanted to tell you that if you're actively trying to get people to testify against that, and you're actively trying to not raise the minimum wage, that you're a fucking class traitor to the working class. You're a fucking scumbag, and you need to resign immediately because you don't have Maryland voters' best interests at heart. So fuck you. My number is I'd be happy to talk to your traitor ass any day, but fuck you, and you really, really, really need to resign immediately. Thank you.
He started off so nice.
He was so nice at the beginning. What happened? And then it's like, he just goes into the FU tirade. But the thing is, he did leave his phone number. So I think, and unfortunately, we don't have that set up today, but we should call him one day.
I was going to call him right after he left me that message, and my wife and the state police advised me not to.
Why? Oh, you talked to the police?
Thought it'd be yeah. You turn in phone calls like that because, you never know what someone's thinking.
I thought he was really nice. It's like,
Yeah, I'm sure if we were in a room together, we probably could have worked this out. But I do think it's odd when someone, that's their first go-to, right? Beat you over the head with a club. And it tells you everything that you need to really know about where we're at in society right now.
Well said.
You can't have a legitimate discussion based around facts and opinions.
Good point. Can I tell you something? You know what my takeaway from that was? My takeaway from what was exactly what you just said, and I would only add that my takeaway is also that we have a society now where the left is pitting people against one another. And that's what you do in Marxist societies in the early stages of Marxism. To be able to destroy a capitalist and free market economy, you have to get people to you have to pit them against each other, like what the Democrats are doing right now. And then it gets people like this guy to call you up and say, you're the reason there's not a $15 minimum wage, when the real issue is, how do you get people to earn more money? That's really the question. And how do you do that? You create better jobs, and at the same time, what else do you do? They need a good education. An education in a field that actually is going to pay well, as opposed to, education in critical race theory, which is, I'm not sure what kind of job you can get after that. Maybe in some Marxist society, but
college.
Yes. But I liked how the guy started out really nice. He started out really nice. So get this, podcast listeners. So the left threatened me too. Imagine that. They threatened me. Such a nice guy. And so I was talking about the climate change issue and about the fact that we have this plastic bag ban that was being debated in Maryland. And the Democrats want to get rid of plastic bags and they want us to use paper bags. Well, the same Democrat Party in the state got rid of the paper bag mills, the mills that make the paper bags. They're called paper mills. And they basically shut them down through environmental regulations. We exported those jobs to Asia. So now in order for us to get paper bags, now that we've banned plastic bags, we have to buy them from Asia. So we got rid of the jobs and we've exported the pollution to Asia, where they don't, of course, really care about environmental stewardship. So I talked about that and also about the climate change issue. And I got one really nasty voicemail. This guy didn't leave his number, though. I'm not sure why. We have that clip, and here it is.
Environmental extremism closed paper mills in Maryland? You smug motherfucker. I look forward to reading your obituary that you died from COVID. Go to hell, asshole.
So I just want this guy to know that right around the time that he left the message, I actually did get COVID, and I'm still alive. So there! That's just stupid. So can you imagine? So, and that is environmental extremism, when you close down entire industries and then you then say, well, we're going to close down paper mills because they're polluters. And then we're going to get rid of plastic bags. And you say to people, well, if you're poor and you live in the city, or if you're just poor and you live anywhere, how are you going to get your stuff from point A to point B? You just use reusable bags. We found out during COVID that that wasn't probably the best idea. There were maybe some concerns about that. And so my point is notwithstanding what you may think about plastic bags or paper bags, the issue is there is environmental extremism going on now in the United States of America, and it is shutting down industry after industry, because under the guise of climate change, you can shut down any industry that you want to. And that was what I actually said. And this individual, of course, left that message. I hope you die from COVID. I mean, jeez.
I mean, it sounds like a delightful human being. I don't know where you go with that on the policy discussion. I mean, it's hard to talk about maybe cap and trade or carbon credits. I don't know where you go with that discussion when you're wishing death on people. But it speaks to their attitude about just really trying to intimidate you into silence. And they don't want to debate. They want you to do what they want you to do.
Exactly. And they're just willing to say anything to try to advance their agenda. And that's what I just don't understand. And that's why we're calling this podcast "The Left is Crazy." And I also think, with them threatening people, it shows that they're losing. I think you're losing your mind, but you're also losing the argument when you have to go to, well, I just want you to die, or I just want you to lose your election. That's kind of a given when someone disagrees with you politically on issues, especially across a broad spectrum of issues. It's kind of a given they're not going to vote for you. So there's not a necessity for them to say, well, you wait, I'm going to make sure I get you unelected. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that's where we are today. And I got to tell you something. It seems, I'm not saying this doesn't happen on the right, okay? But what I am saying is this: it's happening almost exclusively on the left, almost exclusively.
Well, it like gives them carte blanche to treat you this way because they feel like you've personally hurt them.
Right.
Like you insulted them, like it's no different than if you punched them in the face.
Yes.
So that gives them, guilt-free to come out and say some of the craziest stuff. Now, personally, as a child that's grown up in Southern Maryland my entire life, a lot of African-American friends, always been really, known a lot of people, fought against racism. They throw these accusations out like so easily. It should be concerning for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. And that is The Left Threatens Us. And next up, podcast listeners, Dems don't believe America is exceptional. So get this. There's this congressman. He was just elected from New York. And his name is Jamal Bowman. And he's a new congressman. He was just elected last year. And so he just started his new term in January of 2021. And Jamal Bowman is a black congressman, and he has decided that America is a bad country, it's not exceptional, and it is systemically racist. We've heard this before, right? But here you have a guy, and I just want to read what they have about him in Wikipedia. He's an American politician and educator. Oh, that's scary, right? Serving as a U.S. representative from New York 16th Congressional District since 2021. The district covers much of the Bronx, as well as Westchester County, which, by the way, is a very wealthy area, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and Bowman's hometown of Yonkers. Bowman is the founder and former principal of Cornerstone Academy for Social Action, a public middle school in the Bronx. Let me say this again. He's the former principal of Cornerstone Academy for Social Action. That's the name of the school, a public middle school in the Bronx. Now think about a school called, at the end, Social Action. What is that really going to be about? Education? Are you really teaching them about reading, writing, mathematics, and science? Are you teaching them about history? Oh no, it's about social action. Well, this same guy said, it's time to stop spreading the myth of American exceptionalism. And we have a clip on that. We're going to talk about that in a minute with Delegate Morgan. And here's the clip.
But this is a chance for all of us in Congress to sort of begin at a new baseline and stop spreading the myth of American exceptionalism and accept the fact that this is exactly who we are, and this is exactly who we've been throughout our country's history. Whenever there's social progress, there's white backlash, particularly from the people who believe that this needs to remain a white dominant nation, and they are afraid of the multiracial democracy that we are becoming. Right after we send our first African-American and Jewish senators in Georgia to the Senate, right after that, the day after, we have an attack on the Capitol. This is a new baseline, and now we have to deal with the issue of white nationalism seriously in police departments, but also throughout all of America's institutions.
Your thoughts about this lovely congressman?
Well, I mean, he's crazy. When you sit there and look at it, first, race is a hard subject to breach, to talk about. But to think that, and racism obviously existed. There was structural racism,
Under Jim Crow, for sure.
Jim Crow, Civil War. But to say that we haven't made progress is ridiculous. That gets rid of all the legislative achievements of the civil rights movement. And he's talking about American exceptionalism. No country in the world has fought harder against racism than America. America is a mixed race society that has fought extremely hard and is probably the least racist nation on earth. And I'll give him a matter of fact on this, because I've heard this talking point several times. If you look at immigration logs, by 1980, twice as many Africans from the continent of Africa migrated or immigrated to the United States than ever came on slave ships. Why is that? Because they came to the land of opportunity. And both rich people and poor people from around the world, the one thing they have in common is once they make it or want to make it, they want to come here. And we're special and different. And if America is not exceptional, then I'd like to, if he can point to a map where our equal is, I'd be interested in hearing that.
Here's what I think is interesting. The guy's a United States congressman, and he's saying the country's not exceptional. Well, he's a congressman. Like, there are only 435 United States congressmen across the United States. So he's one of only 435. He is obviously a very special person in that he has this very high office that he is holding, and he happens to be black, and yet he's still angry. And this is what I don't understand. And I think that what's going to happen is and he is right about one thing, there is going to be pushback, and there's going to be pushback for good reason, because there is a point at which you say to someone like Congressman Bowman, hey, look, Congressman, you are at this really high level. You make a lot of money as United States Congressman. You have free health care. You have all these great benefits. You've got a pension. You have all the stuff that most Americans don't have.
But you just answered it right there. That's the reason why they say that, right? Because he gets the good salary, the job title, the pension, the health care. They're saying this stuff for their own individual gain.
Always.
And it's not like they can run on their policies working anywhere. Socialism has a 100% failure rate across the entire world. They act like this hasn't been tried before. There was a time where over 2/3 of the world was communist at one point, and it's all collapsed and failed. So it's a failure ideology that they believe in. And it's really troublesome that our country is being pushed that way. And I mean, he's a hustler to get through his agenda.
He really is. And I think that a lot of this is happening too in America, because as more and more members of our country who are Black start voting Republican, and that is happening, you're seeing more and more extremism on the Democrat side, because they know that what is happening is there is becoming more diversity of thought in the Black community, and it scares them because they're so used to people just jumping on their plantation and doing what they want. And it's without question a plantation of low expectations, really. And it's low expectations because if you ever notice, so many of these individuals who are like Mr. Bowman, they had a job before they became congressmen, but it was almost always a public job. In his case, he's a public school principal for middle school. And so he was in the public sector, but does anyone actually measure his success as a public school principal? I mean, did he advance people to the point where they were able to go to college and really learn well? We don't know. We don't know because there's never any reporting on that. He just gets to go and whine all the time and complain. Yet he was in a position of helping children very early on in life in middle school and really making a difference. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but I haven't read anything about it because I've been trying to read a lot about this guy.
Well, I bet you'd be a fascinating person to interview, because I'd like to know when in his opinion, when have we solved the problem?
Yeah.
What is the solution, and when will we know we solved it?
Right. They just want, I'm sure with people like him, I mean, by the way, that's a great point. They can't identify how to solve the problem. I agree with you, because if they do, then they can't keep people in their community in a perpetual state of crisis. And that's how they gain and maintain political power, is by keeping people in a perpetual state of crisis. And it's great for him, right? Because he gets to stay in Congress, making his $200 and some thousand a year, or however much they make these days.
But we know the solution, right? The solution is your family, the conservative principles, where you're an individual, where you work hard and you get ahead. Those are what matters in this country.
I agree.
And for people to sit there and say, well, working hard, that's another culture.
So true.
You're robbing people if you're telling them that because they believe you. And when you're this jaded, I don't see how anyone gets ahead.
And that is the last word for Dems don't believe America is an exceptional. And so next up, podcast listeners, we have a teen creates Think Black. That's right. A teenager who is 16 years old created an organization called Think Black. So it is a website as well as an organization that basically says that if you have a Black business, you advertise your Black business and you buy from Black businesses and Black businesses only. And so this Pikesville teen it's Pikesville, Maryland, has created this organization, and it's been all over the newspapers and so forth. We have a clip on this, but before we play the clip, I have to set this up because the reporter from WJZ 13 in Baltimore, the reporter actually says at some point, oh yeah, that's really good. In other words, complimenting the teen that this is a really good thing to segregate people by businesses. And that's a reporter who's jumping into the story, and it tells you, obviously, the corruption in reporting. And the thing is I'm sure this teen means well. At least I'm assuming the teen means well. But it would be nice if someone also, because it's a 16-year-old, so it's not like a baby, it's a teenager. You can certainly talk to the teenager, and if you're a reporter and ask the questions, hey, do you think that this would maybe separate people? Would this maybe potentially create segregation? Would this take us back in time? Or will this help us? No critical questions whatsoever, because that would elicit critical thinking. We have the clip on that, and here it is.
15-year-old Kelsey Parker created Think Black. It's an online directory where Black-owned businesses can promote their business to customers for free from anywhere in the United States. It also comes in an app. She tells WJZ how she got inspired.
So during the summer of 2020, during the racial injustices in our country and the pandemic, I saw how black businesses were affected, but we were also spotlighted. So I wanted to do things to further promote circulating our dollars and promoting our people on a bigger platform.
Good for her. Pikesville Owings Mills Chamber of Commerce is actually giving her a membership complete with a ribbon cutting ceremony.
So yeah, so the reporter's like, good for her. You know, it's like, well, I'm not really sure that's what you're supposed to do when you're a reporter, is to say good for her. She's creating a segregated organization in terms of businesses that are black, and you should only buy from those businesses. But I also will say this, there's also another side of me that says, well, you know, if there are more black entrepreneurs, and I do believe this, if there are more black entrepreneurs in America, not only will they rise up from poverty, and they will rise in the middle class and the upper middle class and so forth, but in addition to that, I know that they'll become conservatives, because you can't be a small business person or a business person without being a conservative. It just doesn't, you have to be, because as soon as you realize all the taxes that you pay and all the people that you're supporting and all the jobs that you're creating and all the good that you're doing, then you realize, hey, I'm actually a Republican. So there's a side of me that's like, you know, I think it's cool that this teen is doing something to try to assist black businesses. I just wish there was more thinking involved and more critical thinking involved by the press as well, maybe by her parents, to say, you know, honey, what we should do is encourage all people to assist and help people who are small business people, no matter the color of their skin. And at the end of the day, doesn't the product quality matter as well when you buy something? It's like, hey, good. Hey guys, guess what? I bought this car, you know, from this black business. The car is really an awful car, but I bought it from a black business. You know, it's like, is that really what we want? So I have to say, in honesty, I am like torn here, because I do want to see a lot more black business people. And at the same time, I don't want to see the separation of races and businesses. It's really dangerous.
I'm torn as well, because I think the young lady did this for the right reasons. Like she was trying to do right. I'm just trying to think of what adult in this whole sequence between the reporter, the parents, and teachers, or I'm sure were involved in this, thought that this was like, you know, if you changed the color there and said that we're only going to promote white businesses, what would the reaction be if you did that?
It's just, it's dangerous, right? And I agree with you. I think really the takeaway there is you go down a road that never ends well. Because then you could say, well, then now Asians are going to do this, and now Hispanics are going to do this. And then what you're doing is you're promoting identity politics, but not just in places where you live. You're promoting it in only the places that you shop. And I think that's really dangerous.
I get back to what Martin Luther King said. He judged man on the content of his character, not on the color of his skin.
Yeah. Amen to
and
that.
You start, you know, you said about entrepreneurs. Well, we should be celebrating all entrepreneurs because they take a risk.
They do.
And people just misunderstand capitalism. You know, a capitalist, an entrepreneur, doesn't make any money, doesn't feed his family until he creates a product that you want to buy of your own free will.
That's right.
And product quality matters, marketing matters, and the cream will rise to the top. Now, I think we should give people, obviously, a hand up. It's way different than a hand out. And it doesn't make a difference if we're judging an individual, whether you're trying to get into college or a school or a job you're going to hire based on skin color.
Absolutely.
This is the most archaic thing that I've heard in decades. And it just blows my mind that, yeah, I'm 48 years old, and then we're almost like reliving the same problems that were created a century ago. This is archaic thinking and very, very dangerous for the country.
Certainly reliving the policies of 48 years ago and then starting all over again, but not recognizing the patterns. And obviously the media personality there from WJZ TV 13 in Baltimore, I mean, probably one of the dumber reporters, right? So like, oh, well, good for you. This is wonderful. So anyway, that is a teenager creates a Think Black organization. So next up, podcast listeners, Governor DeSantis suspends all COVID restrictions in Florida. That's right. The nation's best governor. I said that. The nation's best governor, without question, Governor DeSantis of the great state of Florida, suspends all COVID restrictions. We have a couple of clips leading up on that, and here it is.
Now today, I'm going to let the legislatures come up, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to sign the bill. It's effective July 1st. I'll also sign an executive order pursuant to that bill, invalidating all remaining local emergency COVID orders effective on July 1st. But then to bridge the gap between then and now, I'm going to suspend, under my executive power, the local emergency orders as it relates to COVID. I think that's the evidence-based thing to do. I think the fact...
So I love it, right? That's the science, that's the evidence-based thing to do. But the subtlety there is what DeSantis did was he also said, hey, all of you local governments, all you local cities, like St. Petersburg, for example, you can no longer have separate COVID restrictions from other parts of the state. He's basically saying, DeSantis, all the state, the entire state is open and all COVID restrictions are lifted and individual local governments can't reimpose them. Well, that's a really smart thing to do. So we have the second part of this clip from DeSantis from this press conference, and here it is.
I think folks that are saying that they need to be policing people at this point, if you're saying that, you really are saying you don't believe in the vaccines. You don't believe in the data. You don't believe in the science. We've embraced the vaccines. We've embraced the science on it. The data, I've said, has been good from the beginning in terms of clinical trials. It's even better in real life.
Isn't that perfect? There's DeSantis saying, so if you want to continue to police people, then what you're saying is that why get a vaccine? Because the whole purpose of the vaccine was to not have to police people and to go back to normal. And so that's why he lifted the COVID restrictions. So the man just makes perfect sense. So that wasn't enough. If that wasn't enough, he proved his point because the mayor of St. Petersburg in Florida, Rick Kreisman, he's the mayor of St. Petersburg. The first thing Rick Kreisman did was he had a press conference right after the DeSantis press conference to say, I don't want to give up my power. That's not fair. You're taking away my power to control my city and make sure it's shut down and make sure everybody has to wear masks and shut down restaurants and all that stuff. Well, Mayor Rick Kreisman also had a press conference, and we have that clip, and here it is.
Instead of the legislature and the governor preempting cities and counties, they should be calling us all up and saying thank you to cities and counties, because what could have happened in the state of Florida, as far as the number of hospitalizations and the number of deaths, didn't happen because of the actions that cities and counties took that this legislation directly addresses and would, in vast large part, prohibit us from doing.
So basically, this guy went on, this mayor of St. Petersburg, and just trashed DeSantis. And we don't want to play the whole clip because it's really long, but he trashed DeSantis again and again and again, saying, I don't think he should be taking this authority away from us. What if there's a resurgence and blah, blah, all this stuff. And it's like, look, the reason the governor did this is because of the fact that we have these woke mayors like Rick Kreisman who want the power and they want to maintain that power, and they can't figure out why. They're more powerful than they've ever been because they have been given all power to close businesses, to shut people down. Thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. Well, first, it's unbelievable the job that DeSantis has done down in Florida. And they had a tough road to hoe to begin with. You remember the spring breakers? The spring breakers, they dumped COVID positive patients down there off the cruise ships. They have a disproportionately older population in Florida. And for them to come through it like they did and really kind of lead on the charge of this has been extremely impressive. But to have a state of emergency, you have to have an emergency. And right now, there doesn't seem to be an emergency with COVID. The vaccines have worked. Many people have taken them. Here in Maryland, we're in walk-in. Anybody who wants to get a vaccine can go to a walk-in. We have a couple of drive-through centers as well. So it is getting time to get back to normal. And I'm glad he's taking the lead on this.
Absolutely. You know what I was thinking? Imagine if Governor Cuomo was governor of Florida, and Governor Cuomo, he probably would have put the spring breakers on the cruise ships with all the old people. and then sent them out to sea and said, yeah, you can't come back until we figure out, that everybody's vaccinated. And of course, then the cruise ship would come back and everybody would be dead, except for the spring breakers who'd still be partying on the cruise ship. But that's the Cuomo logic, of course, and that's the Democrat logic.
And the media's logic.
And the media's logic for sure. But DeSantis, I mean, the guy is such a rock star because he is not doing this, local governments get to decide now. Initially, maybe that made sense. But now, of course, he's saying either you believe in the vaccine or you don't. And if you don't believe in the vaccine, then stay home. And if you do believe in the vaccine, which science tells us that it's working, then stop wearing a mask and start living your life. And if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. But one thing's for sure, if you're a local government, you can't put in your own rules and regulations.
And they hate that. Right.
They can't stand it.
Right now, they have so much power, shutting down business, shutting down restaurants and bars and stuff. Rules that are arbitrary and capricious.
More than they've ever had. And DeSantis has been the one guy who has communicated, and you said this really well, Matt. I mean, you have the largest population in Florida of elderly people in the country. And
that COVID disproportionately affected.
And he has managed to protect largely that population, and that could have been a disaster.
But not necessarily following CDC guidance as well. He followed common sense. And I mean, it was kind of almost brilliant. We're like, well, this virus affects older people. We're going to make sure the elderly get the vaccine first.
Exactly.
Novel concept there.
Exactly.
And, you compare that with other states around the nation, like New York, California.
California. What a mess.
It's been a disaster.
It really has been a disaster. So that is Governor DeSantis suspends all COVID restrictions. So podcast listeners, next up, rhinos revealed. So a rhino, of course, is a Republican in name only, right? That's what it stands for. So we're going to reveal the rhinos. So we have 2 big rhinos in the United States. We have a lot more than that, of course. But the first up is good old Mitt Romney, senator from Utah, went to the Utah State GOP convention. And when Romney went there, he was allowed to speak. Of course, he was one of their featured speakers. It didn't go so well for Mitt Romney because he was booed. And boy, was he booed. And you're going to initially hear Mitt Romney talking in this clip. Then you're going to hear the state Utah GOP chairman say, hey, you need to show some respect. Well, they could have thrown tomatoes. I'm glad they didn't, but they did boo him. And Romney, I think, deserves the booing because he's a complete phony in my book. We have that clip, and here it is. Sounds like the NFL draft,
Please.
When Roger
Thank
Goodell.
you. Show respect. Okay, Senator, thanks, Derek. Thanks, Derek. So, yeah, I understand that I have a few folks that don't like me terribly much, and I'm sorry about that, but I express my mind as I believe is right, and I follow my conscience as I believe is right. And I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the current president's policies.
So there you go. So what Romney tried to do is to say, I'm not a fan of the current president's policies, referring to Joe Biden. So he's trying to shift gears, but that's what Romney said last presidency under Trump. He wasn't a fan of Donald Trump. In fact, he voted twice to impeach Donald Trump. Mitt Romney did. And now he's saying, well, he's not a fan of Joe. So who is he a fan of? He's a fan of Mitt Romney. That's about it. I mean, right?
Well, it makes me feel bad for myself voting for him.
You're right about that. I know.
Back in 2012.
Never thought he was the right guy anyway.
Well, the prime problems what the Republican Party has with rhinos, and you can sum it up pretty quickly, is rhinos come out and they tell you what you want to hear to get elected.
Always.
And then once they're elected, they compromise on everything that you feel is important.
Yes. Yes.
On the big topics like that. And Mitt Romney, there's a guy that met with Trump that was talked about being a Secretary of State at one point, became a senator. And most of us really, really liked at one point.
Yeah, he was governor of Massachusetts. Then he's senator from Utah. And it's like, make up your mind, first of all. Which state do you live in, number one? And number two, you really can't be a governor of a state like Massachusetts and a Republican without being a rhino. I mean, let's face it. And I want people to understand what I'm saying. When you're a governor of a very blue state, and you happen to be a Republican, at least that's what you have the R after your name, you're not going to really get elected unless you make a lot of promises to the citizenry that are really left of center. And so that means what you really want to do is to get elected. You're not really there to try to do the right thing, unless you get elected saying one thing, left of center things, and then get elected and actually do what you really want to do in your heart to fix the state. Well, Romney didn't do that. And you know who else didn't do that? Larry Hogan. Larry Hogan is the governor of Maryland, and he's probably one of the biggest rhino governors, probably the biggest rhino governor in the country right now. And so he's a Republican of the state of Maryland. And Dan Bongino and Donald Trump were having a discussion about Larry Hogan because Larry Hogan again and again and again attacked Donald Trump when he was in office. And Larry Hogan even called Dan Bongino at one point when Larry Hogan was running for governor and asked for a list of names that Larry Hogan could call for money, so he could fundraise. It's just really kind of funny because Hogan now he actually is supportive of the Biden infrastructure bill and the climate change bills. It's hard to believe, but he is. So we have a clip from Bongino and Trump having this discussion about Rhino Larry Hogan. And here's that clip.
I'm with you on the governor of Maryland, too. Really, he should just call himself a Democrat and stop the whole routine.
This guy, I watch him, he's a total loser, and he hasn't been a good governor. He will say on tape all this positive stuff. When I meet him, he's so nice. And then you see him when he's not with you or not on tape where he needs something. It's like, terrible. No,
I had the same experience with him.
I think he wants to run. I think I would give him less than a 0% chance. Okay. But no, he's bad.
I'll make you a bet, Mr. President.
Not a good governor either.
If you run in 2024, that you destroy him in Maryland, in the Maryland. I will bet you my right arm you bury him in Maryland if he wins.
No, I think that's
if he runs.
He doesn't have much going, I can tell you that.
So what's funny about this, podcast listeners, is Dan Bongino actually ran for United States Senate in Maryland. So Bongino actually knows the state, and he's predicting, Bongino is, that if Trump were to run again in 2024, that Larry Hogan, if he were to run against Trump in the primary, Larry couldn't even win his own primary in his own state. And I think that's probably true. And there are many of us that believe he actually might change parties anyway, because he seems to be trending in that direction. It's really hard. Maybe he'll run as an independent. I don't know. Maybe he'll do the whole independent party thing and go down that road. I'm not really sure. But here's the point. The point is that rhinos should be revealed, because either a rhino to me is someone who just wants to stay in office and they're duplicitous. They just want to stay in office, do whatever it takes to stay in office, and then maintain and acquire additional political power by constantly working with Democrats. There's nothing wrong with working with people to get legislation passed. That's not what I'm saying. But totally compromising what's important to their constituents, as you said, Matt.
To me, what a rhino is a person that, we like to tout the word bipartisanship. And bipartisan is very meaningful, but bipartisan for the sake of just being bipartisan is pretty meaningless, because it's normally the left makes us compromise on the stuff that's important to us.
Of course.
And to me, every decision that you make from if you're a political elected person should at least attempt to be directionally correct in where you're going. And I just look at these states, and I mean, it doesn't make a difference. You led into this with talking about Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. Well, DeSantis down in Florida, I think he only won that first election by 1 percentage point. And then instead of coming out there and being squishy and in the middle and trying to cater to both sides just to do it, he came out and talked about what he believed in.
That's a great point.
Was extremely articulate and made good directionally correct decisions. And I'm sure the next time a Florida election rolls around, he's going to win pretty handily, and I'm thinking he's on the cusp of stepping up to a lot bigger office.
I agree with you.
And he's gotten people enthusiastic because
it's a great
when
point.
it comes down to it, our ways, our policies, it's just like with Trump. You know, our ways work, our policies work.
That's because we care about results,
right?
We
and what
actually care about
stands in the
results
way from
and
them
solutions.
is people demonizing them and distorting and distracting.
That's a really good point.
And sometimes those people come from our own party.
I got to say, that's a really good point about DeSantis, because you're right. DeSantis had this really close election in Florida. He then governs. Then governs most definitely to the right of center, and he does so.
And it works.
And he does so with actual meaningful policies, like his anti-rioting policy, which basically says that if rioters come towards your business, among other things, that you can shoot them if they're trying to break in, and also that if a protest turns into a riot, the rioter is they're going to spend at least 6 months in jail. I don't know of any other state that's
mandatory
done that.
minimums. Oh, they work.
Exactly.
No. We need to trust more activist judges, I think.
That's right. And that's Rhinos Revealed. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Assistant Producer? Actually, he's the producer. Here it is. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is mathematics equity in Virginia. That's right. The state of Virginia wants mathematics equity in public schools. And so they are going to, in order to implement that, they're going to end accelerated math classes, all in the name of equity. So in other words, if you are in school, K to 12, and you have a child who is, for whatever reason, very advanced in math, they just get it, right? And we all know those people. And they want to take Algebra 2 when everybody else is still taking general math. Or they want to take geometry when everybody else is still taking general math. That wouldn't be allowed in Virginia, because accelerated math is bad because it's not fair. We want equity. And so California is doing the same thing. And so we have a clip from the policy director for Virginia's Department of Education. Her name is Leslie Sale, and she's going to try to explain what they're trying to achieve. Tell me if you know what she's saying. Here it is.
This is about how and where graduation requirements can operate as a lever for equity. First, we're going to start with one of our more conceptual discussions, which is the possibility of consolidating the standard and advanced studies diploma. And hopefully this discussion will allow us to think through how we maintain a rigorous academic foundation in a way that's really equitably serving the needs and aspirations of all of Virginia's learners.
Sorry, I have to laugh at that, because what she's saying is that everybody should have the same results, right? The outcomes should be the same. And it's not until 11th and 12th grade that you can take advanced courses in math in Virginia with this new policy and new rule with the Virginia Department of Education. So then from K to 10th grade, you have to take all the same math classes, and no one can excel. No one can do well. So I guess the next time I get an airplane, what I should ask the pilot is, hey, have you been educated with math equity? Because if you have been, I'm a lot more secure with your piloting.
This is the soft bigotry of low expectations. And we've seen it here in the state of Maryland. We had a equity bill a couple years ago. It was named Kerwin, and it was after Dr. Brett Kerwin. And I remember questioning him in committee, and I said, well, do you want to lift up all schools and lift up all students to a higher standard, or do you want to close the achievement gap? His answer was, I wanted to close the achievement gap. So this is closing the achievement gap by holding good students back. And it's all about equal outcome. It's all based around equity, which is based around Marxism.
Sure, because they don't believe in merit. Merit is when, and look, it is true that some kids are just smarter than others. It's also true that some adults are smarter than others. You know what's a good time to learn that is in school, because in K to 12, because then what you realize is, hey, you know what? I might not be as smart as this kid on the other side of the class in science, but I might be smarter than him in history. But so what I want to do is I want to learn from this kid who's really smart in science, and I want to improve myself knowing that that's an area that I need to improve in. But no, that's not a recognition now in public education. Now it's like, it's not fair that the guy who's really good in science is better than you, so we're going to hold you all back and dumb it down.
Well, it's probably not. Well, the left doesn't understand that people are just not equal in every aspect. You know, the guy that's good in science probably not real good at gym class, or maybe he is. Look, you take any group of people.
Usually the guys that were good in science were not good in gym class. Let's face that. I mean, come on.
Look, you take any group of people. It doesn't make a difference where it is, or, you know, you take any high school graduation, you know, big body like the General Assembly here in Maryland. You cut that down, you know, left, right, diagonal. You divide that group up. And there's going to be disparities in each group. One group's going to be taller. One group's going to be fatter. One group is going to be smaller. Maybe one group is richer.
One group is better looking.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you can't have
how is that fair?
Equal outcomes, nor should we even strive for that. Imagine
we should have equity in the way people look, you know? So we should like slash up someone's face who's really good looking. And it's like, there you go. Now we've got equity.
Well, we should celebrate people's individualism because we all don't have the same skill set. And that's what should be celebrated. Look, if everybody was an attorney, that would make it really hard to get your car fixed. You know, so, you know, there's individualism out there.
You would get your car fixed. It would just cost a lot.
Well, there wouldn't be anyone to fix it. There'd just be a bunch of people to talk about it.
So speaking of teachers under this dumbest bill in America, there's a teacher that lost herself in Los Angeles. And we have ABC7 Los Angeles News reporting about this teacher where a police officer stopped the teacher who was driving her car. And she, of course, was using her cell phone. And that is a distraction. Let's face it. There are tons of fatalities every year where people are using their cell phones while driving. So the officer was just doing this routine stop. He was going to probably write her just a warning. And then she went off. And this is a teacher, ladies and gentlemen, and someone who's supposed to be promoting equity. And it's California where equity is really important in their public education system because they're doing the same thing as Virginia. You won't believe what this teacher says. We had that clip and here it is.
The interaction quickly turning confrontational as the woman questions the officer's motives for the stop.
You can't be on your cell phone while you're driving.
I wasn't on my phone. I was recording you because you scared me.
You can't use your cell phone while you're recording.
You.
May I have your driver's license?
It's at my apartment.
The deputy eventually telling the woman she too is being recorded.
You're threatening to kill me and my son. Can you give me
I'll tell you what, you keep smiling, you're on camera.
The deputy is wearing a body cam. The LA County Sheriff's Department is in the midst of rolling out body cams to all of its deputies, but this officer has yet to receive one. He's wearing a personal body cam.
Yeah, so can you believe that? So this deputy bought his own body cam because he was so concerned about people like this teacher who was recording him with her phone. She had it in her hand anyway, because that's why she was stopped, you know, because she was using it. Recording him saying that he was a racist because he stopped her. And what else did she say? I mean, just some crazy, crazy stuff. And I thought there was supposed to be equity in education. If this is the kind of teacher that's teaching your children, and I think increasingly there are more teachers like this. I know they're not all this way, but increasingly more are. We are in trouble as a nation.
Well, my question is, why isn't anybody making a claim to go after her teaching license? I mean, it's pretty obvious that this lady has some bias in her own opinions.
Yes.
I mean, for this to come out, and there should be no cause from the left at all to...
I'm pretty sure if you're in her math class, if she happens to teach math, and you're a white person, you're getting an F, right? Because, you know, she is all about this.
If your parents are a cop.
Exactly. Your father's a police officer? Oh my gosh, he's a rapist and he's a murderer. She called him a murderer. That's what it was.
It said he'd been murdering her and her kids. I don't, it's just, that's crazy.
The country is losing its mind. So if you want to know someone who's bringing it all back together with systemic racism issues, and that would be Governor DeSantis of Florida. He was recently interviewed. And he really just attacks this issue. You know what? This makes me proud to be a Republican because I have to say this. I'm not afraid of attacking this issue and taking on this issue, I should say, of systemic racism head on about how it's complete and utter nonsense and how people have opportunities in this country, all people, that we've never had before. It's the best time ever to be alive in this country. And unfortunately, Very, very few Republicans are saying this because they're terrified to talk about it because they're rhinos. And we have this clip from Governor DeSantis, and here it is.
This proposition that we are a systemically racist country. Your reaction?
Well, it's a bunch of horse manure. I mean, give me a break. This country has had more opportunity for more people than any country in the history of the world. And it doesn't matter where you trace your ancestry from. We've had people that have been able to succeed and all. And here's the problem with things like critical race theory that they're peddling. They're basically saying all our institutions are bankrupt and they're illegitimate. Okay, so how do you have a society if everything in your society is illegitimate? So it's a very harmful ideology, and I would say really a race-based version of a Marxist-type ideology. So we've banned it in our schools here in Florida. We're not going to put any taxpayer dollars to critical race theory, and we want to treat people as individuals, not as members of groups.
Unbelievable.
That
I
was
mean,
perfect.
It's finally Republican actually articulates it in a way that is understandable, but at the same time, aspirational. Because we're talking about this dumbest bill in America about mathematics equity in Virginia and also in California, and all this woke education where merit doesn't matter. What matters is your race, and we're going to equalize everybody based on race, not based on merit. And here's DeSantis saying, enough already. It's horse manure.
Well, he's absolutely correct in that. Look, the thing that America is a systemically racist country, what systems are the racist ones? Look, I've asked this question a couple of times in questioning witnesses up there in Annapolis, and it goes something like this. When you have a disparity between an outcome of two ethnic groups, when is the case not racism? And I've yet to hear anyone give a coherent answer for that. And the answer is when there's evidence of racism. See, when there's evidence of racism, we're willing to stand with you and fight against it. We have a long track record of that. But you're having situations now where the left comes out because Republicans are so bad at talking about it.
Of course.
There was a recent poll that came out that said 77% of conservatives are just don't even want to deal with the issue.
DeSantis is the only one that I know that has talked about
it.
Right,
and they're so bad at talking about it and they don't run towards the fire. This is why the left is just clobber them over their head right now to move the agenda forward, to move the ball forward.
Because don't you agree that systemic racism, the term, is like climate change? There's no real way to measure progress. And that's what they want. They don't want progress to be made because it's immeasurable. Because climate change initially was CO2 emissions, and they're like, no, now climate change is negative emissions, and now climate change is trees, and now climate change is solar panels, and now climate change. I mean,
what always got me is that they always claim systemic racism in areas of the country where they control all the levers of power.
Right. That's a fact. That's a fact.
I mean, it's like, well, systemic racism is the greatest in the areas that they govern.
Yes.
And no one's called them out and confronted them on those issues.
That's because if we said ad nauseum on this program, they don't want school choice because they want the plantation mentality to continue. I am convinced of that. And the black Republicans that are stepping up, that are elected officials, they're talking about it. And, we need more of those people, just like we talked about previously, the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, and of course, the senator from South Carolina, the attorney general of Kentucky. So many people getting elected at high levels who are Republicans, black, and also taking on this issue. Final thoughts on the dumbest bill in America.
It's pretty dumb.
And
I hope it doesn't come here.
And that's the dumbest bill in America. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.